Carl makes stuff. That would make a pretty cool collaboration.
Hey man, how are you doing?
Hey Carl, I think it's about time we do a collaboration. Maybe something from The Lord of the Rings?
You have my sword.
Awesome mate, that is.
And you have my bow.
Haha, very
and my axe.
Okay, I get it man, you're in. Right, so what do you want to build?
The bridge of Khazad-Dûm.
Perfect, so are you up for starting the build and sending it to me to finish off?
Absolutely man, I'll get started right away. Hey, you know what would make it really cool? If we had an army of Moria goblins.
Awesome idea, I know just the guy. Elston Nation.
Hey dude, how's it going?
Hey dude, how do you fancy painting up another army?
Do I want to paint another army? I mean... Yeah, I actually do want to paint another army. What do you need?
I need a batch of badass Moria goblins and I've got a week to complete the project. Do you have the minerals?
I do like a challenge. I'll tell you what. I'll get you an worthy of Mordor before you even know it.
Legend. Thanks a million man. Chat to you soon. Bye. Hey guys, welcome back to Nat1 Videos. Right now on screen you can see the bridge and crevasse for Khazad-Dûm that was built by Carl and sent all the way to London from sunny Malta. I have to say he has done an awesome job on his end of the build, and quite frankly when I got this in the post I was a little bit nervous because the standard had already been set so high. Carl and I have been friends for about a year or so now. Out of nowhere I had started to get lots of little tidbits of advice and constructive criticism on my videos from a channel called Carl Makes Stuff, and naturally a friendship formed leading to this inevitable collaboration. I've been wanting to build Khazad-Dûm for such a long time, but now I'm really glad that I waited and had the opportunity to team up with another skilled crafter like Carl. For my end of the build, I wanted to extend the terrain out on both sides of the crevasse, featuring an interpretation of the Great Hall of Moria, but also some external playable terrain for when the surviving fellowship escape Khazad-Dûm. I used 2 large sheets of chipboard as the basis for my build, for the simple reason that I walked past a building site and they were throwing it away, and I was thinking about the project at the time, so it was meant to be. Now, when it comes to building large gaming terrain boards, I'll be honest, I am not that experienced. Most of my projects are small diorama style builds using primarily XPS foam. So when it came to this project, I did a bit of research and took inspiration from terrain builders like Joe Levine over at Encounter Terrain, who use PIR foam to form large areas of terrain. It's easy to cut, carve and break, but it is also really solid, making a very useful material for building terrain. You can see here how I used the chipboard as a guide to cut the foam to shape. I just used a kitchen knife, washed it and put it back before anyone noticed. And for gluing the foam to the board, I used Strong Stuff Super Adhesive. The downside about this glue is that it takes a good 24 hours to set fully, but the upside is that once it's set, it is going nowhere. I didn't want to risk the base falling off the terrain somewhere down the line. You can see how I left a gap at the front of one of the boards to make room for an entrance into the build. And with the fact that this had to glue for 24 hours, it was the perfect opportunity for me to start making the archway entrance to the Great Hall of Moria. For the archway, I started by making some jigs out of cardboard and then I spray mounted them to my XPS foam, making sure that I got nice, smooth, accurate cut when it came to using the Proxon later on. I've been doing this a lot recently. It is such an easy technique, but it really is a game changer. Another cool little tip for the Proxon is if you want to cut angles, simply move the wire along the bail arm until you get your preferred angle. Okay, that's all my pieces for the arch ready, so time to move on. On my last build on this channel, I made Balanced Tomb, and I took the inspiration of adding more layers into the details from Jarred Boom, which I've also carried forward into this build. Basically, the more detail you add to a piece, the better and more immersive it will end up being. So I ended up hand carving some layers into the arch, followed by a detailed trim all the way around the outside. This took ages, but in the end it was worth the extra effort. Dwarven architecture is full of lots of angular and symmetrical designs like this, so it's really going to set the whole piece off. I glued the archway using PVA glue and then pinned it into place until it was solid. I really like the idea of having multiple points of entry or escape for when you're running your tabletop encounters. As you can see, I added 2 little side arches into the structure. Little details like this just give your players more options for gameplay, which in turn makes the whole gaming experience more enjoyable. Installing the archway into the terrain was a little bit tricky. I wanted to have 3 separate staircases, one large one up the middle and 2 smaller staircases up the sides. But I had totally forgotten to pre-carve these into the PIR foam before gluing it into place, so I ended up having to work around some pretty awkward angles with a rather blunt knife. PIR foam is quite brittle, so I ended up making some pretty messy cuts. I mean, they still turned out okay, but I have a feeling that I would have done a much better job of this if I had done things in the right order. Anyway, this is supposed to be an old worn out stonework, so it's all good. For the main staircase I used XPS foam, specifically because I wanted to do this really cool pencil technique. This ends up making the foam look like carved stonework. This is definitely one of my favourite new techniques for stone textures with XPS foam. Once everything was carved, I glued it all into place using hot glue. Now, normally I use hot glue on XPS foam as little as possible because you can melt it. PIR foam, however, does not melt with this kind of heat, and the parts where the glue touched the XPS foam, well, that wouldn't be visible. Now this project is supposed to be a mine beneath a mountain, so I needed lots and lots of natural looking rock textures, and for me the best go-to material for this is tree bark. I use this stuff all the time. I simply glue it into place all over the arch and around the edges of the terrain to give the impression of cave walls. Now, using bark for your rock textures over this much surface area really leaves a lot of gaps, and that just doesn't look good. So I used some modelling compound from Geek Gaming Scenics to fill that all in and blend it all together, making it look like one solid piece of natural stone. Just make sure to pack it well into the cracks so that it has a really solid bond. Also, I would advise not mixing up huge amounts of this to work with because it does really start to solidify quite quickly. I'd say it was between half an hour and 45 minutes or so before this batch had set rock hard. I also wanted to create some cliff-like structures within the build. For this I used some rough-cut cork pieces that are used for reptile terrariums. These stony outcrops really help to break up the terrain and create some other levels for minis to stand on, like goblin arches or something like that. And of course I used lots and lots of modelling compound to blend everything together. Right, time for a little musical interlude for you guys, featuring none other than the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Colin Bressie on lead vocals. Little bit of Mod Podge, doing Mod Podge. On to gluing hundreds of XPS foam tiles. Now for this I lined up my project alongside Carl's build so that I could get exactly the right depth for the tiles and also blend into his style really nicely. I wanted to make the join between the two pieces as seamless as possible. The extra depth that I had in the tiles gave me the idea of adding a raised step platform in this area, which wasn't in my original plans, but I think it ended up looking even better than my original idea. Okay, say hello to my nephew Elijah. Doing a little update. We got some tiles going out. Got some forced labour happening over here.
Help me, please. Please help.
Laying some tiles down. Mines of Moria. Everything's fine with a glass of red wine. Hope you guys are all having a good time. So as you can probably tell by now, this was another really big build and there were lots of tedious tasks like this that just took ages. I was pressing hard to complete the build and get my video out today to coincide with Josh, Elston and Carl, so I needed to get a little help. Gladly, Elijah was happy to jump in and lend me a hand. It's the perfect opportunity here for me to say thank you, Elijah. I really appreciate all the support you've given me with the channel and my build projects. I honestly couldn't have got to this point without all your help behind the scenes. Okay, enough sobby stuff. Let's move on to gluing some ground up bark around all the edges to help blend the tiles into the cliff walls. Did I mention I really like using bark for building terrain? And then we are going to need some dwarven pillars. Making dwarven pillars is the perfect activity to do when you're having an online crafting session with friends. If you want to see these pillars made in detail, please check out my Balance Tomb video. I have a segment all about the dwarven pillar jig that was converted from a drawing that I did by Jared Boom from Shifting Lands. In this project, however, I wanted to make the pillars removable for easy storage and to prevent them from getting broken. So I just put magnets into the bases and into the terrain where the pillars are supposed to go.
A Balrog, muttered Gandalf. Now I understand. He faltered and leaned heavily on his staff. What an evil fortune, and I am already weary. I'm gonna need a Balrog.
What fresh devilry is this? Hello?
A Balrog. A demon of the ancient world.
Who is this?
It's Michael Man, Nat One Videos.
Oh, hey Michael, how's it going? What can I do for you?
You don't fancy painting me a Balrog, do you?
So let me get this straight. You've started a project and now you've decided that you need a Balrog, so you want me to paint one for you. Just for you, Michael. I'll see what I can do.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much. Can't wait to see it.
Fly, you fool.
So yeah, I managed to get Josh from the Pickle Jar involved in the project too, painting up a Balrog. I mean, it just wouldn't be the Bridge of Khazad-Dûm without a Balrog, would it? Josh, you are a legend. May the blessings of men and elves and free folk go with you. Okay, let's smash through this outdoor terrain. This is where PR foam really comes into its own. It is so easy to carve out shapes that look really good as natural rocky terrain. Now, you could just stop with the rough cut foam, but you can get some really next level stone textures simply by roughly brushing into the foam with a stiff bristle brush. This is a crafting shortcut at its finest. Now, a lot of the techniques I use for the outdoor terrain are pretty much the same as the indoor terrain. Yes, you guessed it, lots of hot glue and bark, followed by lots of PVA glue and bark clippings, and then lots more PVA glue and bark that I put in a blender and made a very fine texture flock. Also, having built a pretty epic entrance to Khazad-Dûm, I was going to need an epic exit too. Again, using XPS foam to build up some dwarven layered arch-like structures and gluing them securely into place with hot glue. And then guess what? I used some bark to build up the back of the train and all of the cliff walls on the exit, followed by some modelling compound to fill in the gaps. Lastly, I used some offcuts from the dwarven pillars because I just thought that they would look really cool as buttresses. And bish bash bosh, the job is done. Let's get on to the painting. I was tempted to play the Mod Podge song for you guys again, but I thought I'd just jump straight into the first coat of graphite grey for all of the rock structures in the build, followed by burnt umber for all of the areas that are going to be either muddy or grassy. I also made sure to do a very light dry brushing with this over all of the rocks. I then mixed in some titanium white with the burnt umber and dry brushed all over the rocky areas. On top of that, I added some green grey to mix up those natural tones, and to finish it off I added titanium white to the green grey for my final highlights. Okay, on to the flocking. For this project I wanted to make the terrain really durable, as I hope that it will see a lot of gameplay, so I decided to use foam flocks instead of static grass. I used two colours, a light green and a dark green, both from Geek Gaming Scenics. I also added some Geek Gaming Scenics Patchy Plains Base Ready mix just to bring some sandy textures and small rubble. Once that was all glued into place, I sprayed the whole project with matte Scenic Sealant. And to finish off the greenery, I added a few little grass tufts here and there just to give the piece some variation. If you're interested in these products, check the links below this video. And more painting, this time the internal terrain. I wanted to go for a colder set of tones for the internal terrain, so I started with blue grey mixed with graphite grey as my base coat. I used this over the whole terrain. I then followed this up with a light dry brushing of burnt umber just to give a hint of those earthy tones coming through. I then came back in with a mix of blue grey, graphite grey and titanium white to start to lighten up the stonework. Even though I wanted to give the impression of it being dark, it needed to be lightened up a little. And lastly, I added even more titanium white to that mix for my final highlights over the whole piece of internal terrain. And with that done, the project is complete and I can finally show you the finished product. I hope you enjoy the big reveal.
Devilry. This foe is beyond any of you! Run! You shall not
So there we go guys, the end of another awesome collaboration project, and I've had so much fun making this one. Just want to say a massive thanks to Carl for helping me get this started off and building the actual bridge of Khazad-Dûm. He did such a great job and it was so much fun to build on top of that. And also to Josh and Elston for painting those awesome minis for me, and I'm showing some footage on screen right now of all three of their videos. So please go and check out their channels and make sure you subscribe. You're going to get some awesome content over there. I just want to also say a massive thank you to my patrons as usual. You guys are awesome and I hope you're still enjoying this stuff that I'm posting over on Patreon for you guys. And this build is got a special shout out for Mominator1, the latest member of my Dunedain tier in Patreon. So yeah, if you join my Dunedain tier, you're going to get a shout out and a dedicated build towards you. So this is Mominator1 build. Alright guys, thanks so much. Hope you really enjoyed it and I'll see you next time. Cheers, bye. Join Colin Bressy, Zane Morgan and myself every Saturday at 10 AM PST, that's 6 PM UK time on the Crazy Crafter live stream, featuring awesome guests every week from the crafting community. Link in the description below this video.